Well, good morning and welcome. I'm Kevin Williams of Survival Skills Rider Training, and this is Elevenses, my twice weekly webcast. It's live. It's Sunday, the 23rd of April. It's show number 327. It's a greying morning outside here in northwest London. I think the weather's going to turn unpleasant later on today. So, what have we got in the news for you today? Motorcycle sales, perhaps not surprising, collapsed in Russia in 2022, stunting riders in Kerala in India have been tracked down through social media. A stolen Rocket 3 was spotted on CCTV with no less than 4 riders on it, joyriding. The Bantam could be making a return. BSA are apparently seeking to trademark that name and 2 others. There's a new online rider hub and a new V4 motor from China's QJ Motor. Meanwhile, the Livewire 1 electric motorcycle from the Harley Davidson offshoot, that is due to arrive in Europe, and it's come with a price cut. And another electric motorcycle, the Sondor Metacycle, has also had a big slash in price. And finally, today's discussion point, as the new riding season sort of stutters into life. It's not been particularly nice weather for going riding bikes recently, but it hasn't stopped the local police forces, of course, from having their annual Ride Safe campaigns. And we'll be having a look at some statistics that Police Scotland have been reporting on bike crash data. So, stay with me for the next 30 odd minutes as we go through all that. Excuse me if I sound a bit hoarse this morning. I've got a bit of a cold, and I've actually got some honey and lemon here, so hopefully I won't be coughing too much as I go through the next series of talks. Now then, first of all, just a quick apology for anybody who was hoping to see the live presentation on Wednesday. Well, that didn't happen because as the day went on after delivering 11s in the morning, I felt increasingly under the weather, and by sort of mid-evening I'd actually lost my voice. It's still not properly come back, as you may be able to hear. So hopefully I will get that recorded for you. I'm not going to try and run it live. The plan is to run that as a recording. So hopefully, as I say, we'll get that sorted out in the next few days when I can actually talk properly, and you'll get that particular presentation. The next one, which I hopefully will go out live, is going to be in May, Wednesday the 1st, and that'll be Science of Being Seen. That'll be the full presentation. Tickets are £5. If you can't make it live, don't forget they are available on the catch-up for at least 72 hours after the live presentation, and you can top up here if you want to come along and do it. And we have Nigel who says, I won't need a coffee if I'm on the Lemsip. Yeah, something like that. Kevin, who's looked in and said good morning, and Terry, who's also here from New Zealand. Nice to see you, Terry. Funny enough, I've got your post coming up at the end of the show. So right, don't forget, if you do want to get all the back articles from the week, just sign up to my Substack newsletter. The link to that is here. I'll just pop that in. That'll give you links to everything that's gone on in the previous week. Okay, so from there it's time to get on with the news. And first thing that I just wanted to mention is the figures out of Russia. Now what's come out suggests very strongly that the Russian motorcycle sales figures have actually collapsed over the 2022 period due to the Ukraine invasion. Now, I'm not sure how much trust we've put in the data being 100% accurate, since it comes from a completely unknown online analytics source called Motorcycles Data, and it looks at a country which is also notorious for spreading disinformation, but it would not surprise me in the least if the 2022 sales were not down at least the 74.4% as billed. Now, for what it's worth, it's been projected that 2023 sales will be even lower. Now, prior to the events in Ukraine, the two-wheeler market in Russia was actually growing quite rapidly, and the sales to the premium brands, including BMW, Harley-Davidson, Ducati and the Japanese manufacturers, were all on the up. But with the imposition of sanctions on Russia, the US, European and Japanese manufacturers have all quit the country. And of course, once dealer stock dropped to zero, sales collapsed completely. Now, some of the shortfall has been filled with motorcycles which are being imported from India and China, who don't have sanctions on Russia. But essentially, these machines are a bit more utilitarian, and they certainly can't challenge the top end sort of bikes from the likes of BMW and Ducati. So the high status models are no longer available out there. Meanwhile, head to Kerala in India and you'll find there the story about 53 motorcycles and scooters being seized in statewide checks conducted by the police and the motor vehicle department on two-wheelers. Now, the operation was aimed at catching riders who'd carried out either illegal modifications on motorcycles or indulging in bike stunts on public roads, or probably both together. So how did the police and the motor vehicle department officials actually target specific riders? Well, the answer is very simple. They actually just went to social media platforms and they found the videos posted up by these very riders of the machines showing off proudly their modifications, such things as exhaust pipes which have been changed for noisier ones, and power upgrades, and videos of their bike stunts too. And they then simply tracked down the owners, and a total of 85 people have been fined the local equivalent of over £6,000. Now, given that the average wage in India is quite a bit less than it is in the UK, you can see that is actually a fairly swinging fine. Okay. Whoops, that was the wrong button. Now, I can't say that the gargantuan Rocket 3 from Triumph is actually one of my bikes that I would ever be keen to buy, because basically I always like my bikes compact and light, and I'm quite happy not to have vast amounts of power. But they do have their fan base, I will quite happily admit that, and clearly this particular bike appealed to these riders. Now, if you look carefully, I know it's a bit grainy because it's a security cam footage, but you'll see there's actually 4 people sitting on that motorcycle as it's being ridden. Now, this particular Triumph Rocket 3 was taken from a house in Poole, and the owner, Mark Absalom, he reported the theft to Dorset Police, but he actually took the step too of posting the news of the bike being stolen on social media, along with details, of course, of the machine itself. And it was the Facebook group, the Biker that helped find it. Now, it seems that on Wednesday morning, Mark was actually contacted by a member of Biker to say his Triumph had been dumped locally, and he was able to go and retrieve it. And although it had been left with some damage, scratches and mudguards apparently were a bit worse for wear, he said he was happy to have it back. Now, 2 quick comments from me on that story. The first thing is that Mark has since been told by his insurance company that the bike is going to be written off. Now, the machine's valued at £9,000. So if his description there of scratches and damaged mudguards are actually correct, and there's nothing else to be replaced other than presumably the damaged ignition system, which would have been required to start the machine, I'm a bit struggling to see how the repair bill could reach £9,000. And this is one of the problems, I think, with the insurance, is they're very happy to write off bikes like this far too quickly rather than repair them. And of course that everybody ends up having to pay the extra for their insurance. But the second question is about why it was stolen in the first place. And this is one I keep coming back to. Why does such an expensive model of motorcycle have such poor security that it can be started and ridden away by a bunch of youths intent on nothing more than a joyride. They clearly aren't professional thieves. Now, don't forget, if you have anything to say, questions, comments, I'm more than happy to answer those as I go along. And if you want to set a reminder, do so. The show goes out at 11 UK time on Sundays and Wednesdays, nearly always live, occasionally recorded, and very, very rarely I have to miss a show for some other reason. Right, now, another bike that never really appealed to me, not that I actually ever rode one, but I did end up fixing one fairly regularly for the owner, and ended up pushing it from time to time too. And that's the BSA Bantam. Now, I happen to know that Chris Hurren, of course, is a fan of the BSA Bantam. He owns a couple, and his wife calls the one he rides the exercise bike because he usually ends up pushing it home too. Now, excuse me. Now, the Bantam itself was reworked pre-war DKW two-stroke. It was acquired as war reparations after the Second World War, and it, according to Wikipedia, more than 250,000, possibly near 500,000 of the bikes were actually built by BSA between 1948 and 1971. But the interesting thing is that the BSA Bantam could be about to make a comeback. Now, Indian bike builder Mahindra, who now own the BSA brand name, and of course recently launched the 650 single cylinder bike which carries the Gold Star name, have now made trademark applications for not just the Bantam name but also Lightning and Thunderbolt. Now, if granted, that would give the company BSA brand names for an entire range of models, from the small sort of entry-level machine right through to a touring machine and a sports twin. Now, one article speculates that Mahindra, who also own Yawa and its related Yezdi brand, they already have a 334 four-stroke single, and the article suggested that that machine could be the source of the engine for a new Bantam. The only thing I can ask there is that they get it to run rather more reliably. Now, the original BSA Lightning was designed as an all-round sports machine in the 60s, and largely to exploit the big export market for that kind of bike in the US. The Thunderbolt was BSA's touring motorcycle at the same time, and it was a traditional single carburettor air-cooled 650 twin. It was reputed to be rather smoother than earlier BSA twins, and it was supposedly comfortable at cruising up to 70 miles per hour, so fairly quick for its time. And it was another big hit in the US until the emerging Japanese bikes killed the UK industry off. Now, the fact is that BSA have actually applied for US trademarks, and that's quite interesting because there apparently have been some recent changes to US legislation, and what this means is that brands can no longer cling on to trademarks that they don't actually use. For example, the Lightning and Thunderbolt names were actually owned by Buell until fairly recently, but they're now lapsed. And so the implication is that if BSA have gone to the trouble of getting hold of these names again, they have a genuine plan to use them in the not too distant future. Now, the obvious route would be for Mahindra to recreate the classic 650 twins. They would take on Royal Enfield 650s head on, but of course that could backfire and take away sales from the 650 Gold Star single. So perhaps an alternative would be to build an 800 or a 900 twin to top the Enfield and to rival the Bonneville. Now, in the UK, the Gold Star has reputedly been selling well enough, and I didn't spot last month's sales figures, but it said that no less than 253 of them were sold in March. and that makes it the best selling retro of the month. And it places it actually not far behind top sellers. The new Honda CB750 Hornet sold 271 units. And the perennial top seller, the R1250 GS Adventure, was at 364. So you can see that the BS8 has actually done pretty well. But one thing I would say is I would genuinely hope that the new Bantam gets decent electrics rather than the cobbled together system on the original bike, which I was forever trying to fix for the owner. And can I put in a plea, BSA please, for tubeless tyres on your bikes? It's 2023 for heaven's sakes, and it's almost 45 years since the CX500 did away with blowouts by fitting tubeless tyres. You can have rim laced tyres, wheels where the spokes go to the edge of the rim, and you can have a tubeless fitment on a spoked wheel if you want to be traditional. But it's certainly not essential to have tubes. Now, one trivia moment for you. The BSA Lightning, this is it, fitted with missile tubes. There you'll see the launchers under the fairing. That appeared in the 1965 James Bond film Thunderball, where it was ridden by the former road race champion Bill Ivey as a stunt double for the Bond girl in that movie, and he was sporting a fetching blonde wig. The missile launch system supposedly worked, though I find that a little bit hard to believe. If you did fire a rocket out of those tubes, I suspect the rider's knee would get a bit scorched. But they weren't used to blow the car up in the stunt. It was actually blown up by a controlled explosion. So a bit of trivia from James Bond. Alright, got a comment there which I hadn't spotted earlier. Terry says 7-up on a TS 185 on the school tennis court. Yeah, I can imagine. Somehow, Terry, you don't surprise me with that story. Right, now I recently came across a motorcycle rider hub. Here it is. I'll just pop the picture up for you. There it is. Billing itself as the UK's first and only online learning platform for all motorcyclists. Well, leaving aside the small fact that I first created online learning for riders back in the early 2000s, so get to 20 odd years ago now, and I'm still delivering it, the hub does seem very polished. There's clearly a lot of thoughtful work gone into the design, that's for sure. But it does have rather less content than I've published in the past. And it also comes without the learn this, try it out approach that I personally prefer to use. But hey ho. I was also interested in the reasons for setting it up. Quote, despite significant developments in both rider safety and training standards, motorcycle accident statistics remain high. Well, I'll come back to that actually at the end of the show when I look at the Bike Scotland details. The great concern to us is that the high number of accidents each year in the UK are attributed, they actually wrote contributed, but they mean attributed to rider error. This is a worry as riders are not prepared for this type of riding that they do. Have had the wrong advice or practicing by trial and error. Now, where exactly have you heard that before? I'm sure that you will recognise those sentiments. Nigel says his best British bike, A65 Carbon's Lightning in gold as per the James Bond film. That must have been fun back in the day. However, alongside the development there of the Indian motorcycle industry, the Chinese industry continues to push ahead with the development of new engines. Now, it's interesting because obviously the ICE development in Japan and the West generally has largely stagnated because of the proposed bans on petrol engines. Now, I've previously reported that Bender have shown off development work on a pair of V4 engines, one a 500, the other a 1200, and back in January, I announced that Moto, who are rather better known, are working on a 200 horsepower V4 superbike. Oh dearie me, excuse me. Now it seems V4 is the flavour of the year, because the latest news is that QJ Motor, who are part of the giant Qianzhong group, are also developing a V4, and it's appeared in multiple patent applications. It's a 90-degree V4, probably around the 1000cc mark, double overhead cam, 4 valves per cylinder, chain drive to the top end. Now, if the motor is ever built, it's almost certain to power a domestic superbike, and maybe the Chinese are looking at that Russian market to replace the missing bikes from the West. But another theory is it could end up in a Benelli, since QJ actually owns the Italian brand and have done since 2005. Now, this is where it gets interesting, because QJ have also had a link with KTM, and KTM have now signed an agreement to work with CF Moto. So we now have a bit of tension between those two. Now, previous reports had suggested that QJ Motor had intended to get into the superbike market by rebodying an MV Agusta 1000. An MV are owned by KTM, but KTM's parent company, Pira Industry, they took a substantial stake in MV last year, and since KTM has that close relationship with the CF Moto, it does look like some prior MV products which would have used QJ's engine now looking serious doubt. Now, one of these is the Lucky Explorer 5.5, which appeared back in 2021. I'm pretty sure I had it featured on here. And that would have been powered by QJ's middleweight parallel twin. It's found in not only QJ Motors' own SRT 550, but also the Benelli TRK 502, which just happens to be the best-selling bike in Italy. But that, it looks very much like that will never happen. The larger 3-cylinder Lucky Explorer 9.5 uses MV's own engine, a triple, and that's heading for production, but the references apparently to the 550 Lucky Explorer 5.5 have now disappeared from MV's website. So building their own V4 would mean that QJ Motor and Benelli would not need to be linked to MV via KTM, and that wouldn't conflict with CF Moto. So interesting politics of what's going on behind the scenes there. Now, very quickly then, on to Livewire. The electric motorcycle brand that was spun out of Harley, you probably recall. They've just announced that the flagship Livewire 1 is to be relaunched in Europe. This is what it looks like, in case you have forgotten. It's the successor to the original Harley-Davidson Livewire. The Livewire itself first appeared in front of the media 2014. Prototypes were available for test rides at some dealerships later that year, then in Europe and Canada in 2015. Took a while, but the production models appeared in 2019. And then December 2021, Harley-Davidson announced that there would be a spin-off into a new Livewire company, and their remit would be to focus entirely on electric motorcycles. Now, the bad news is that when the bike appeared, it was actually priced at just a fraction under $30,000 US. Now, that may have suited a flagship model, but it was hardly likely to persuade fans of the ICE to switch to electric power. And in any case, with the creation of the new company, supplies of the machine pretty much dried up outside the US. But the bike's descendant, the Livewire 1, is now back on sale, and here's the remarkable bit: given the rampant inflation over the last year, it's 25% cheaper than the original bike. Yes, you heard me right, it's down in price. It's just been launched in the US at $23,000. In Europe it works out at around €25,000, and the UK price is listed at £22,290. So to put that into perspective with a petrol engine bike, the base spec Panigale V4 Ducati will currently empty your wallet to the tune of £22,995, so almost exactly the same bill for the Panigale. So it's fair to say it's still solidly in premium motorcycle territory, but it's no longer reasonable to say that electric motorcycles are more expensive than ICE bikes. And the fact is, it's actually now in the same territory as Zero, which may have something to do with the Livewire price point, and it also may have something to do with the fact that Zero themselves have just announced a current incentive to go electric deal. They're running that till the end of May, and that's resulting in fairly whopping price reductions across their range too. Now, of course, I would not argue that there are still problems with these bikes. They're still short on range, around 140 for the city, 90 miles of mixed city highway there for both models. But if you ride relatively short rides, you're prepared to take a break, the Livewire does come with DC fast charging and will get up to around 80% charge in about 30 minutes. And riders have managed the 1,000 miles in a day iron butt challenge on a Livewire, so you can ride it quite a distance. And if you're happy to charge at home at night, there's a level wall 1 charger tucked under the seat. So next time round, I'll also be looking at the pricing of the new Livewire S2, that's the Del Mar. Now, if we head to the more utilitarian end of the market, earlier this year, the crowd-funded US company SoS announced what they called a credit of $2,500 against the full bike price to the first 1,000 customers who put down a $500 deposit on their Metacycle, that's the bike in the picture there, by March 15th. Now, that dropped the effective price of the bike from $6,500 to $4,000. That's quite a whopping reduction, almost 40%. Now, not perhaps surprisingly, the company actually sold out of those machines in just a week. So in response, Sondors have decided to extend the $2,500 discount beyond the original and cut-off date, and to remove the cap of 1,000 bikes too. And they say that the increase of volume that they will be building has allowed them to negotiate better pricing from the contractor who actually builds the bikes. And they plan to deliver Q4 of 2023. But there are rumours that customers who ordered the bike over 2 years ago may still be waiting for it. So, okay, on to the final in-depth topic today before my voice gives out completely. Now, as I said, it's the time of the year when the weather begins to warm up and dry up. And as more riders do emerge onto the roads, naturally enough, it's also the season for annual bike safety campaigns. And it seems almost an annual event these days. I have to include some kind of lies, damn lies and statistics piece as I look at the data that is being shared with us by the police forces and other interested groups who attempt to persuade us their interventions are actually necessary. Now, this time it's the turn of Police Scotland. Now, let me just dig out the headline, which appeared spread pretty much across the press in Scotland. There it is: police launch motorcycle safety campaign after 27 riders die in a year. The smaller text says the total number of motorcycle deaths is higher than in any of the previous 3 years, Police Scotland said. Okay, and the text, which was based on the police press release, it said more motorcyclists died on Scotland's roads in the past year than any of the previous 3, and they basically started the campaign on Tuesday, and the officer said it was aiming to promote safe riding and to raise awareness amongst other road users, so the usual goals. Now, Superintendent Stuart Mackey, he's the Deputy Head of Road Policing and said to be a keen biker himself. He said, quotes, "My message to fellow riders is know how to take care on the road because it will save lives and help prevent life-changing injuries." And the statement went on to warn riders that patrols would take place throughout the spring and some months using both marked and unmarked vehicles, as I said. We often get the carrot with the stick when it comes to policing motorcycling. So, let's try and look beyond the headlines because these reports always sound grim, don't they? Worse than the previous 3 years. But let's have actually a look at the actual numbers, and here they are. 2022-23, so that's the year just gone, 27 fatalities. 20, 21, 22, 25, 2020, 21, 18, 2019 to 2026. So yes, I would agree. Technically speaking, 27 is higher than 26 or 25, but the wording in the press release has been written to imply that the number of deaths really is sort of significantly up. You know, it's not just saying that it's just nearly the same. So if we exclude 2020, 21 for a moment, the other 3 years are actually almost the same. The average of the 3 data points is 26. Now, a moment's thought also told us that the year when deaths were significantly lower, 2020, 21, was lockdown year. And of course, there were fewer riders on the roads, travelling fewer miles, and all traffic was lighter because road travel was fairly well curtailed for many months. Now, Brake made a similar lurid claim in November, actually, when they said, "End the carnage and make roads safe for all." And they claimed that motorcycle deaths and serious injuries in Scotland have soared by 20% from 261 in 2020, lockdown you remember, to 312 in 2021. And again, they cherry-picked the data to suit their message. Now, Police Scotland's message is, strictly speaking, correct, given the choice of just 4 years as data point. But what happens if we look at a longer timeline? And this is where it actually gets quite interesting. So have a look at this piece. This particular graph, let me just zoom in on it a little so you can see a little bit more clearly. There we go, you can see the title, Motorcyclists All Casualties, Motorcyclist People Killed. And if you look, you can also see the timeline runs from 2009 to 2019, so it's the period immediately before the Police Scotland had taken their data. And actually what you can see is the number of deaths actually flat lines pretty much back in time until you get back to somewhere around it looks probably on the graph to be about 2012, something like that, 2013 perhaps, and 2009 the number is a little bit higher at 43 and you can see there was a steady decline, and then it's kind of flatlined for the next few years. So in other words, we're not seeing big rises in fatalities, and if you look at the overall injury stats, they've been steadily coming down. What if we go even further back? Well, let's have a look at another graph. This is killed and seriously injured, 79 to 2013. Now this is actually GB stats because I can't find Scottish data for the period, but it's unlikely to be significantly different. It will just be a much smaller proportion of the overall numbers. What I really want to point out is the shape of the graph. You can see there was a peak in killed and seriously injured around about 1980, very early 80s, and then there's been a fairly steady decline. There was a little mini bump, which is around about the turn of the century, and then it's been falling pretty much ever since. So we're getting a very different picture from that data than we are from the Police Scotland headline, let alone the sort of lurid end the carnage statement from Brake. And we can of course go back even further. Let's have a look at the data for the last 100 years, more or less. And again, this is for Great Britain, and what you'll see is that casualties on the roads peaked in 1930 and have been coming down with some glitches ever since. So you can see that there was a peak in about 1930, then a fall, a bit of a jump there in 1939, and then a big drop through the war years, then a climb again immediately after the war finished, through to the sort of mid 1950s, beginning of the 1960s, and then it dropped fairly steadily again through to around about mid 70s, when there was if you are old enough to remember, that's when I got into biking. There was a sudden surge in popularity till about 1980, and that was matched by more deaths, of course, because there were more bikes on the road travelling more miles. And then finally you get a steady fall until the mid 90s, when you may remember direct access came in and encouraged a lot of people to get back into biking, and we got a bump then, and it's been dropping pretty much ever since. So that's again really very different picture from what we've been talking about. Whoops, that was the wrong button. So don't get me wrong, you know, whenever I get into these kind of stats, people say, oh, but you know, death's a bad thing, and I wouldn't disagree at all. Every single death on the road is a tragedy, and we should do all we should do to stop it. But what we shouldn't be doing is misrepresenting the data. What we should be doing is giving people real, genuine information, because if we don't, the safety message is devalued. So here's what's true. Whilst most cyclists do account for only 1% of the road traffic, they are overrepresented in killed and seriously injured stats by around 17% in Scotland's latest data. And that's basically because it's hard to mitigate the effects of a crash once the accident has occurred. You often see it stated that motorcyclists are more likely to crash. We're not. I think we have slightly higher risk of a car driver crashing. It's just the consequences when we do. And that's why we need to be on guard, because we can't afford to crash. So some of the more useful risk factors that may help us focus on not crashing are these. 22 of the 27 deaths in those latest figures in Scotland happened during the months of April to September, so it's summer riding. Loss of control was the most common factor in motorcycle crashes, not drivers pulling out in front of bikes at junctions. Loss of control. Most fatalities involve male riders. Doesn't mean you're immune if you're female, but it does mean that there are a lot more men around, and so they fill out the stats. Riders generally female, little bit lower risk, but it doesn't mean that you're immune. And the most common age range was between 46 and 55, which again, that is because we're looking at fatalities. Younger riders tend to crash at lower speeds, so they get injured but not killed. So maybe if you happen to fit that demographic, you'll pay a little bit more attention, probably a lot more attention than you will seeing that headline from Police Scotland. And even if you don't, hopefully you'll remember that all of us on two wheels are vulnerable. So now that does wrap up today's show. We've got a couple of comments here. Terry says, he said the Bond bike had rockets initially propelled out of North Tubes using compressed air. Yeah, that would work, I suppose. The rocket propulsion only kicked in a safe distance away from the bike. Yeah, I suppose you could do that. I suppose you could use spring-loaded as well, but I doubt it would do much for accuracy. But anyway, hey-ho. And Kevin says he hopes the Scotland Awareness Scheme better than our recent Motorcycle Road Safety Week. Yeah, that was the one that I mentioned the week after it happened because I'd missed all the stories about it, wasn't it? Yeah, not so good. Right, okay, so one final thing just to share with you. Thank you very much, of course, if you are a regular here. If you're watching for the first time, I hope you've enjoyed the show. I hope my choking to death hasn't put you off too much. A bit more honey and lemon, hopefully. I'll be back to talking normally on Wednesday. So if you do enjoy the show, first time or regular, live on catch up, whether you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, please do like the videos, subscribe to the page or the channel, and then share the show with your biking buddies and let's get the viewing figures up again. We have dropped off a bit recently. So thanks for Terry there out in New Zealand for his particular effort to share the show there. I know our 11 AM time slot isn't the most convenient for the Kiwis, but I do appreciate you and your local riders out there looking in when I'm live. So that's it for today. If you are out there on the bike and taking advantage of the dry weather while it remains dry, do stay shiny side up.